Imagine a world where a single civilization held the keys to the world's wealth for 10 uninterrupted centuries, controlling seas without modern navies, moving fortunes without banks as we know them, and connecting empires without a single satellite or a fiber optic cable. This was not the age of Wall Street or Silicon Valley. This was a time when caravans glided across deserts like floating fortresses of gold, and ships carved through oceans with sails that caught not just the wind, but the pulse of global trade itself. From the crowded spice markets of Zanzibar to the gold-laden ports of Malacca, from the libraries of Baghdad to the bustling harbors of Cairo, the Muslim world was the beating heart of a global network that no rival could match. They didn't just move goods, they moved ideas, technologies, and entire economies, binding continents together in a web of influence that stretched further than the imagination of kings. Today, we're going to step inside that forgotten empire of commerce and see how it rose, how it ruled, and why its lessons could redefine the future of trade itself. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about the history of global power. The Muslim world's dominance in trade for a millennium was anchored by its unrivaled geographic position, spanning from the Iberian Peninsula in the west to the borders of China in the east. The Islamic empires controlled the most strategic trade corridors on earth. This vast stretch of territory sat directly between the major economic centers of Europe, Africa, and Asia, making it an unavoidable bridge for merchants and goods. Overland routes like the Silk Road ran through cities such as Damascus, Baghdad, and Samarkand, where caravans exchanged silk, spices, porcelain, and other treasures. At the same time, maritime routes passed through the Red Sea, the Persian Gulf, and across the Arabian Sea, connecting the Mediterranean with the Indian Ocean trade network. Muslim rulers recognized the value of these positions and invested heavily in maintaining safe roads, fortified ports, and efficient customs systems. Control of choke points such as the Strait of Hormuz, the Bab el-Mandeb, and later the Strait of Malacca allowed them to regulate and profit from the constant flow of goods. This control was not only about collecting tariffs, but also about securing political leverage over neighboring powers dependent on these routes. Cities under Muslim rule became vibrant marketplaces and cosmopolitan hubs where goods, ideas, and cultures met. The location allowed traders to act as intermediaries between Europe's demand for Eastern luxuries and Asia's hunger for precious metals and manufactured goods from the West. This geographic advantage, combined with political stability in many periods of Islamic history, meant that the Muslim world could facilitate unmatched by any other civilization of the time. It was this natural positioning, coupled with strategic governance, that made their dominance in global commerce not just possible, but inevitable for centuries. One of the strongest advantages the Muslim world had in dominating trade for centuries was the creation of a unified economic and cultural network that spanned thousands of miles. Under the Islamic caliphates, regions that had once been fragmented by language barriers, inconsistent laws, and differing customs were brought together under a shared framework. Arabic became the common language of commerce, scholarship, and governance, making communication between merchants from distant lands far more efficient. A trader from Morocco could negotiate deals with a merchant from India without needing multiple interpreters or risking misunderstandings that could damage business. The legal framework provided by Sharia law offered consistent rules for contracts, property rights, and dispute resolution, giving traders a sense of security no matter where they traveled within the Muslim world. Standardized weights, measures, and coinage reduced confusion and built confidence in transactions. Trust was further reinforced by the ethical expectations placed on traders, where honesty and fair dealing were not just moral virtues, but religious obligations. Caravans and ships could move between cities like Cairo, Damascus, and Basra with the assurance that they were entering a system that recognized and protected their rights. This unity also meant that trade agreements, partnerships, and investment arrangements could extend across vast distances without the complications seen in other regions, where political and legal systems shifted from one border to the next. In essence, the Muslim world functioned like a single, massive free trade zone long before such a concept existed in modern economics. This level of interconnectedness allowed goods, capital, and ideas to flow freely, multiplying the speed and volume of trade. It was this shared language, common law, and unified cultural ethos that transformed a geographically vast empire into one coherent marketplace that could outperform any rival in scale and efficiency. A major factor in the Muslim world's century-long dominance of global trade was its mastery of maritime and navigation technology. The Islamic civilizations inherited and advanced the seafaring knowledge of earlier cultures such as the Greeks, Persians, and Indians, then combined it with innovations from China to create an unparalleled maritime network. Muslim shipbuilders developed sturdy, maneuverable vessels like the dhow and the bagla, which could carry large cargoes across long distances while withstanding harsh sea conditions. They perfected the latent sail, allowing ships to tack against the wind and navigate more efficiently. Navigation was revolutionized through the refinement of tools such as the astrolabe and the adoption of the magnetic compass, enabling sailors to calculate their positions with greater accuracy even when out of sight of land. Knowledge of seasonal monsoon winds in the Indian Ocean allowed Muslim merchants to time their voyages precisely, maximizing speed and safety. These technological advantages gave them dominance over crucial maritime routes linking East Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, India, Southeast Asia, and China. Ports like Aden, Calicut, and Malacca became thriving hubs where goods such as spices, silk, ivory, and gold were exchanged in staggering quantities. Control over sea lanes meant they could bypass dangerous overland routes, reduce travel times, and increase trade volume. Moreover, Islamic navigators documented their routes in detailed maritime charts and travelogues, creating a body of navigational knowledge that could be passed down and improved over generations. This maritime supremacy ensured that Muslim merchants not only controlled the flow of goods, but also the information and pricing power tied to those goods. Their ability to connect distant markets reliably and at scale was a critical pillar of their long-standing commercial dominance, making them indispensable to global trade for nearly 1,000 years. One of the most transformative contributions of the Muslim world to global commerce was its innovation in finance and banking, which revolutionized how trade was conducted across vast distances. Muslim merchants and financiers developed systems that allowed for safe, efficient transactions without the need to physically transport large sums of gold or silver, which was both risky and slow. Instruments like the suftaja, a type of bill of exchange, and hawala, an early trust-based remittance system, enabled traders to deposit funds in one city and withdraw them in another, often thousands of miles away through trusted intermediaries. These mechanisms dramatically reduced the dangers of theft and allowed for greater mobility of capital. Banks and merchant houses emerged in key cities such as Baghdad, Cairo, and Damascus, acting as centers for currency exchange, deposit services, and investment partnerships. Merchants could enter into Madaraba arrangements where one party provided capital and the other expertise, with profits shared according to pre-agreed terms and losses borne by the investor alone. This model encouraged entrepreneurship and expanded the scale of trade. The standardization of financial contracts backed by Islamic law further enhanced trust, making it possible to conduct high-value transactions between partners who had never met in person. The integration of these financial innovations with a vast trade network meant that a merchant in North Africa could finance a shipment from India without leaving home, confident that the system would function smoothly. These tools not only boosted efficiency, but also expanded the reach of Muslim trade deep into Europe, sub-Saharan Africa, and East Asia. By reducing transaction risks, increasing liquidity, and enabling large-scale commercial ventures, the Muslim world built a financial infrastructure that underpinned its dominance in global trade for centuries and influenced future banking systems in Europe during the Renaissance. The Muslim world's dominance in trade for centuries was reinforced by its control over some of the most sought-after luxury goods and critical resources of the medieval era. Muslim merchants acted as the essential link between producers in Asia and Africa and consumers in Europe and beyond, controlling both the flow and the pricing of high-value commodities. Spices such as cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and pepper were transported from Southeast Asia and India through Muslim-controlled sea routes, passing through ports like Aden, Hormuz, and Cairo, before reaching European markets. Silks and fine textiles from China, precious gems from India, and ivory and gold from East Africa moved along trade routes secured and managed by Muslim traders. This control over luxury goods was not limited to mere transportation. Muslim merchants often negotiated directly with producers, secured exclusive supply agreements, and established trading colonies in strategic locations to maintain dominance over the supply chain. By managing storage, distribution, and the timing of shipments, they could influence market prices and ensure steady profits. In addition to luxury goods, they also played a pivotal role in the trade of vital resources such as salt, copper, and iron, which were essential for both daily life and warfare. Cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo became major redistribution centers where goods from different regions were gathered, sorted, and prepared for export to targeted markets. This ability to act as both middlemen and market makers gave Muslim traders an unmatched competitive edge. European powers depended heavily on these networks for access to Eastern goods, often paying high premiums due to limited supply and fierce demand. This monopoly over high-value products not only secured wealth, but also political leverage, ensuring that Muslim traders remained central players in the global economy for nearly 1,000 years. A defining feature of the Muslim world's trade dominance was its openness to cultural exchange and its role as a hub for the transfer of knowledge, ideas, and innovation. Unlike many empires that viewed outsiders with suspicion, the Islamic trading network welcomed merchants, scholars, and artisans from diverse backgrounds, creating vibrant cosmopolitan centers where commerce and learning thrived side by side. Cities like Baghdad, Cairo, Damascus, and Cordoba were not only marketplaces, but also centers of intellectual activity, attracting mathematicians, physicians, philosophers, and engineers from across Europe, Africa, and Asia. This cultural inclusivity enhanced trade efficiency by fostering trust and mutual understanding among people of different languages and traditions. Muslim traders often learned multiple languages, adapted to various cultural practices, and respected local customs, which helped them establish long-term trading relationships in far-flung regions. The exchange was not limited to goods. Technological innovations, agricultural techniques, and scientific discoveries also traveled along these routes. Knowledge of advanced irrigation systems, papermaking from China, and new navigational tools spread through Muslim-controlled trade networks, benefiting not only their own economies, but also those of their trading partners. Religious tolerance in many Islamic states further encouraged foreign merchants to settle and contribute to the economy without fear of persecution, strengthening local economies and diversifying trade. These multicultural environments allowed for the blending of artistic styles, culinary traditions, and business practices, enriching both commerce and culture. By creating a network that valued collaboration over isolation, this openness to cultural and intellectual exchange ensured a steady flow of innovation and ideas, keeping their trade systems adaptable and resilient, and sustaining their commercial dominance for nearly 1,000 years. In a rapidly changing global landscape, for 1,000 years, the Muslim world stood at the heart of global commerce, not by chance, but by design. It was a civilization that united continents, mastered the seas, innovated in finance, controlled the world's most coveted goods, and opened its doors to the exchange of culture and knowledge. Its traders were not just merchants, they were diplomats, innovators, and bridge builders between East and West. They turned geography into opportunity, diversity into strength, and ethics into a competitive advantage. This was not a short-lived dominance. It was a sustained era of prosperity that shaped the foundations of modern trade and finance as we know them today. The story of this 1,000-year reign is not just history. It's a blueprint for how values, vision, and strategy can build a lasting economic legacy. Thank you for lending your time and attention to a story that deserves to be remembered. Good luck in your own journey of learning and growth. May you build with wisdom, lead with integrity, and think beyond the limits of today. And may the lessons of the past inspire you to create a future worth trading for. Thank you.